Okay, I'm sharing here the Rambam here.
Yeah, so you're gonna scroll the Rambam or?
I'll scroll, yeah.
Okay.
I'm sharing the Rambam here on the screen here. We are starting. Thank you, Mendel. Thank you, Mendy. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We'll begin here. We will.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Good afternoon. Good morning. Yes, we're in Los Angeles, so it's morning. It even drizzled a few drops over here, so I feel like I'm with you guys. Yeah. And then it stopped. So we are now actually moving on to the laws of tzitzit, the laws of Hilchot Tzitzit. So we'll get right into it. I will try to show you some imagery here from my screen. It may be a little small, but I'll try my best to show you with my tzitzis here. So let's go ahead here. Hilchot Tzitzis Akdama, Hilchot Tzitzis Mitzvah Seachas V'hilas Tzitzis Al Kanfei Aksus U'Bir Mitzvah B'Prakim Elu. The halachas of tzitzis contains one mitzvah, and that is to put tzitzis on the corner of your clothing, and we will elaborate these in these following laws. Number one, the tassel that is made on the fringes of the garment from the same fabric, that's what is called tzitzis. And why the name tzitzis? Because it says in Yecheskel and Ezekiel, and he took me by the locks of my head. So tzitzis is the locks of the head, so therefore that's why we call it tzitzis, meaning just like the hair, it's stringy, so likewise the tzitzis is stringy, and that's why we call it tzitzis. This tzitzis is white because we are not commanded to dye it. According to the biblical law, according to the Torah, there's no real amount that you have to put. Now, what do? After you have the wool strands, you dye one of them the color of the color of tcheles, which is the color of it's kind of a bluish color, it's sky-like color, and then you take that one string and you strap it around. So I don't have it, but I'm sure you've seen sometimes some people have a blue string within their tzitzit. That is what we call the tcheles. According to the Torah, there's no requirement amount of numbers of times that you have to roll over this string around the blue one around the white ones. So like this. To summarize, there are two commandments within this mitzvah. One, that one of them is that you should have fringes of the garment that comes down from the actual corner. That on these strings that come out, you should put around this tcheles color, the blue, because the ones that you put on originally are white ones. Now, on the white ones, you should put blue ones. Shenamar. Where do we see that this is from the Torah? This is a biblical thing. It says in the verse, "V'asulam tzitzis," you should make tzitzis for yourself, tassels. And it says, "V'nasnu al tzitzis hakana psil techeles," and you should place on the tassels of the corners of strands of techeles. So you see, it talks about having the tassels, and then it talks about having the techeles. So that's why both of these are biblical commandments. Now, number 4, being that they're two separate commandments, one, you can fulfill one without the other. One does not prevent the other, which means if you only have the white strings, you do the white strings. If you only have the blue strings, you do the blue strings. If you only have the white ones, you do the white ones. If the white ones rip and you only have the blue ones, it's still kosher. Number 5, even though one does not prevent the other, but nevertheless, it's really only one mitzvah. Our sages tell us, it says, and it should be for, our sages say, and they shall be tzitzis for you. And because we say it as one idea that they are tzitzis, meaning that really it's one commandment. All 4 corners do prevent each, meaning are important. Meaning if you only do 3 corners of the tzitzis, then it's not considered a mitzvah. If a person, if a person wears a talis that has the white strings or the blue strings, or both of them, then he does do the mitzvah. But most importantly is that you do it on all four corners. Which means like this, tzitzis, if you see the tzitzis, let's say the talis that's in the synagogue or the tzitzis that people wear, there are four corners on them. And each one of the four corners have to have tzitzis in order for it to be considered the mitzvah. So now, number 6. Keser oyser tzitzis, how are these tzitzis made? So maskil mizavish shel talis shisoy fa'arog u'marchiv menu lo yoyser shalosh etzbois l'mayla lo pachis mikasher gudel machri sham arba chutim kaif l'batza. So how is it done? I'm going to try to show you here on my screen over here. Here is a corner. Here is a corner of the tzitzis. Here's the corner right here. We have the corner. So you move inwards from the end. You move inwards 3 fingers in. Right over here. You see 1, 2, 3. Here's the hole, right? And you do at least 3 fingers, but not less than a thumb inwards. And then what happens is you put in 4 strings into this corner right over here. You put in 4 strings, and then you bring it up this way. So then once you put in 4 strings and you pull it upwards, you end up having 8 strings, right? 4 on this side and 4 on that side. It should be at least 4 fingers long. If it's longer than 4 fingers, even if it's a full amma, full handbreadth, it's fine. It's good. Even if it's longer, if it's the length of an amma is a full handbreadth, it's fine. And he's saying from the 8 ones, one of them should be at least the blue color dyed one, and the other 7 should be the white ones. Now, then what happens is you take one of the white strings. See, really they should all be strings like this. You see how this is all strings? Where does that? So what happens is, really before they make these knots, it is really all strings. Then you have to take one of the white strings and pull it around. You see these round things that we have here? That's basically taking one of the strings and wrapping it around. So he says like this, you take one, we got it in the camera here. You take the white string and you wrap it around. Then you take the blue string, which I don't have here, and we'll discuss that later in the Maimonides. We'll discuss about that. And you wrap the blue one around 2 times. These 3 times you wrap it around is called a knot. Then he says you move away a little bit, and then you wrap around just the blue color dye, one around. And he says you move a little bit and then you wrap it around again. You move it a little, wrap it around again. The blue times, then you wrap around the white one. So it ends up being like this. You see, it's wrapped around multiple times. Here's one wrapper knot, another wrapper knot, another wrapper knot, another wrapper knot. This is what the Maimonides is talking about. The reason why you end off with white, says the Maimonides, you started with white, so you end off with white. And the idea is that when it comes to something that's holy, you only go up in value, you don't go down. So because of so why do you start with white? Is because the corner is white, so therefore you start off with white. You want it to be the same color. That's the voice of Abercrombie. And likewise, what we just spoke about doing on one corner, you should do on all 4 corners. Number 8. How many segments should be made on every corner? Not less than 7 and not more than 13. That's the best way to do it. If, however, one only did 1 segment around the strands, meaning, see right here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you only did 1, then it's still fine. If you did the blue dye on most of it, it's also good. The best way, the nicest way to do it, he says, is that whatever knots you end up doing should be 1/3 of the tzitzis knot and then 2/3 of the tzitzis string. So that's why if you'll see, I'll pull it like this. Are we in here? If I'll pull it like this, you see it has knots here, and then it has string, and if I wrap it up again, it's the same string. So in my tzitzis, I have 2/3 string and 1/3 knot. That's the nicest way to do it. And he says you have to make sure that the strings are not knotted together. It should be like your hair, with most people's hair. That's not knotty. Number 9. What if you don't have, so just to show you like this, the tzitzis that we're doing, that we have the wraparound, really it's only one string that wraps around. You make a knot, you wrap around, that string is much longer because it has to do all the wrapping. So we spoke earlier that string should be the blue string. What if you don't have a blue string? So then the 8 strings should be a white string and do the wrapping with the white string. And this one string, if you want to make segments like this one, you see you make segments, there's wrapping around, then right here is a knot, then you wrap again, and here's a knot, and you wrap again. So those knots, if you want to do the knots, you can do it. And he says this is our custom. If you don't want to do it without those knots, you don't have to. Again, like we said before, the most important is that whatever you do with the wrapping around is 1/3 of the length and 2/3 is you have the strings here. But some people are not careful in this when it comes to the white string. And some people, they take the white string and they wrap it around all the way till it's much higher than this tzitzis that you see. He says that's fine. And even if you just do one knot, one small amount, that's also fine. Either way is okay. Number 10. Both these white strings or the dyed tcheles may be they may be entwined strands, which means like these strings, if you look closely into them, they are really, it's like it's winded type of wool here. So if you want to do it that way, that's fine. But if you want to do a single strand without winding them up, that's also fine. Either one is fine. Number 11. Whether it's the white strands or the tcheles dye lines, it has to be when somebody's making it, has to be with intent that he's doing it for the mitzvah. Don't make it from wool which becomes attached to thorns when sheep graze among them, nor from the hairs which are pulled from the animals. And not from the leftover strands of the wool which the weavers leave over when completing a garment. Rather, they must be made from shorn wool or from flax. You're not allowed to do it from wool that's stolen, and not wool from a town that serves idols, and not from something that's holy, from the holy temple. And if you did it, it's no good. If somebody decides to bow down to an animal and make it idol worship, its wool is no good for tzitzis. But if somebody bows down to flax, which is planted, it is considered kosher because it did change, because you took it out of the ground and it changed. Therefore, by changing it, you took it out of its original status. Number 12, tzitzis tzitzis that a Gentile does is no good. Like it says in the Torah, it says, speak to the children of Israel, and they should make tzitzis. which means that it should be done by them. But if a Jew does it without the right intent, that it should be used for a mitzvah, it is kosher. Tzitzis that are made from those already existing are not acceptable. Ketzad, what does it mean to make tzitzis from an already existing? So he says like this, Ketzad, he's going to explain how that's possible. Hevi kanav shesh ba tzitzis utfara ala beged, afilu yesh boisa kanav ama al ama pasul shenemer baslam tzitzis v'loy mina asa she'ezeh doime l'misha nasa me'alel muter lahate tzitzis mebeged zev l'sleis mebeged acher ben tches lo. How's it? If a person brings the corner of garments which has tzitzis, let's say you take it like this. You take this corner, for example, has tzitzis already. So let's say this corner was cut off and you took this corner and you made tzitzis attached, but then I sewed this corner on with the tzitzis already on. That's no good. Because really what you have to do is the corner has to be there, because before I sewed it on, there was no corner. I wasn't obligated for tzitzis. Now I'm sewing it on the corner and the tzitzis at the same time. That's no good. You have to have a corner and then put tzitzis on it. Number 14. But what you are allowed to do is you're allowed to remove these strands and then put these strands on another corner. Number 14. Let's say you decided to do strings. Let's say you have two corners right here. I'm trying to put this in the camera here. You have two corners right here. And instead of doing the tzitzis separately, first this one and the first that one, you do it together, meaning you pull the strings into both holes and you tie it up. And then at the end, so you end up with this, two sides, and then you snip it. So that's no good, because you have to do each corner on its own, because when you snip it, at the same time that you're snipping it, you're separating them. So then that's considered that it was already done. Number 15. Hitil tzitzis al tzitzis. If a person ties tzitzis over existing tzitzis. If you did, let's say I have this corner and I don't want this one anymore. So the best thing is to snip it off and put new ones in. But I kept it on and I used the same holes to put new ones in. So if you had in mind that you're going to nullify and get rid of this one, then that's fine. But if you did not have in mind, you decided I want two tzitzis. Even if you cut one later, that's no good. So the reason why it's no good, let's say I decided that I'm doing two of them, and then later I regret it and I want to cut off. The problem is when I did two of them, I added. By adding, I made the whole thing not kosher. Now when I took it away, I'm making it kosher, but at the same time that I'm making kosher, I already have tzitzis. So I have to make it kosher and then put tzitzis. This is another example of that you're doing the tzitzis in a manner which it is existing previously, and therefore it's not acceptable. Number 16. Same thing would be if, let's say, I have a garment that has three corners. So I put tzitzis on all the three corners, and then I make a fourth corner, and then I put tzitzis on the fourth corner. It's no good, because I already put tzitzis when this garment was not obligated for tzitzis, and then when it became obligated for tzitzis, I already had tzitzis. It can't be. You can't have, which is considered having tzitzis that was made previously that it was obligated to. So again, it falls into the same category that we speak in all these different examples, that it's no good. Number 17. A garment should not be folded in half. You shouldn't fold it in half and then tzitzis hang on the four corners on the fold when it's folded, unless you sew it on one side entirely, then that's sufficient. But only to sew it on one side, it's no good. So therefore, folding it is not good. If you sew it, then that's how the garment is. But just folding it is no good. Number 18. Nifsaka kanaf shesh tzitzis chutz l'shloisha etzba'is teifrim mimkaima. So let's say you have a corner here, right? Right here, yeah. You have a corner here, and it's 3 fingers away from the end. But what if this hole starts opening up and the tzitzis starts getting closer to the end, right? And if it gets too close to the end, it's no good, right? So what should you do? If it's still within 3 fingers away, then try to sew it in its place so it doesn't move. Now, if it's within 3 fingers and it's too close to the end, then it's considered invalid. So don't sew it in its place. If let's say somehow this end side, where are we here? Yeah, this end side started to get much less from the end, so therefore it's again not 3 quarters. So then it's fine. And likewise, meaning the reason why it's fine is because it started off as a kosher tzitzis, and if it falls apart a little bit, it's still fine. Likewise, if let's say I have these long strings and then it starts to get less and less and less all the way to the end, this one rips and this one gets cut, it's still kosher. As long as you have enough to make a little knot, then it's kosher. But if a string gets cut off all the way from the beginning, meaning like this. See, here is, right here. See, here you have string all the way to the top, right? Now, if the string gets cut off all the way to the bottom, as long as there's enough to make a little knot, it still stays kosher. But if it gets pulled off all the way within this here, and there's not enough to make it a little knot, then it's invalid. All right, with that, we finished the first chapter. Let's move on to chapter number 2. This that now we're going to get into the tchelis that we spoke about, this blue dyed string that you're supposed to use for tzitzis. So the color, what color should be? It should be color of the sky, which appears opposite of the sun when there is a clear sky. When you have a clear sky, not cloudy, and all you have is the sun, that is the color, the preferred color. This is tchelis when used regarding the tzitzis, refers to the specific dye that remains beautiful without changing it. It's a specific dye that doesn't change. It stays beautiful. If you didn't do it with that specific dye, then it's invalid. I mean, you can't just pick up a blue from Home Depot and do it. If let's say you did it with a dark dye, a black dye, those are not good. Rachel bas eis samra pasul tzitzis, the wool of the that the goat gave birth is a wool that is from a goat that gave birth is unacceptable and is no good for tzitzis. Number 2. So now that you have the right dye, the right color, the beautiful one, now how do you dye the tzitzis? How do you dye because it starts off as a white string and you got to dye it. So how do you do it? You take the wool and you soak it in lime. Afterwards, you take it and you wash it until it's clean. And then you boil it with bleach and the like. Like the dyer's practice, in order to prepare it to accept dye. Then you bring blood from the chilazain fish. This is the fish called chilazain, whose blood is black like ink. It is found in the Mediterranean Sea. And then you take this blood and you place it in a pot together with herbs, like chamomile and other dye, like the dyer's practice. It is boiled with the wool until it becomes the color of sky blue. This is the tchelis of tzitzis, and this is how it's made. Number 3. When you dye it, it has to be done with the right intent for the mitzvah. If you did it with the wrong intent, it is unacceptable. If when one places some of the wool in the pot, if he was doing it just to check if the dye is good, then that's no good because you're not doing it in intent for a mitzvah. What should you do? So you should take a little bit. Don't use the whole vat. Don't use the whole color. Take a little bit out in a smaller vessel. Check it that way because that you're not doing for the mitzvah, you're doing for the checking. And then the rest is still kosher. And make sure you burn the one that you check so nobody thinks that it was done for the mitzvah. Dump out the dye that you used just to check if it was the right color. And then take the rest of the tzitzis and dye it with the one that was left in the original vessel because there you didn't contaminate it, so to say. You didn't make it invalid by trying it because it wasn't done for the mitzvah, because you already took some out. Number 4, one should not purchase this blue string only from a professional, someone that you, because we're afraid that if it's not done by the right person, maybe they did it not for the right intent. Even if you took it from someone that's a recognized dealer, but then you realize that it wasn't done properly, then it is not acceptable. How do you know? You took it from a dealer, a recognized dealer. So we said that if you know that it wasn't done properly, then it's no good. But how do you know? So he's going to give you a way that you could crack the code and know if it was dyed properly. So he says like this. One takes straw and urine that has been left standing for 40 days, and you leave the tchelis in this mixture for an entire day. If it stayed exactly the same color, then you know it's kosher. But if it became weaker, you placed the tcheles that changed its color inside the dough of barley meal that was left to sour for fish brine. Then you leave the tcheles in this bread and you cook it in the oven. And then you take out the string from the bread. And you see if it became even weaker than how it became weaker from the original mixture of the urine and the straw. But if it became even more darker than before you baked it in this in the barley, then it's kosher. Number 6. Chotzer shemoichim bat cheles v'yimuchzakim bekashrus, a place that a dealer that people would purchase the cheles from, and it was known to be this is a kosher place. So he's saying, he gave you he gave you the way how to find out if it's kosher, but he's saying like this. He says you don't have to every time you buy this blue string, you have to check it yourself. If it's a place that's known to be kosher, then you can continue buying the blue string from that place.
So are you a co-host?
But if you left the blue string by a Gentile, you have to be careful that maybe they switched it.
That's good, Bashman.
Mendel, mute your computer. But if you gave it to a Gentile, you left it by somebody. If it was within 2 vessels, then it's considered kosher. But if it were, meaning with 2 seals, when it comes to the laws of kosher, when you get something in the airplane or other things and it's kosher, it has to have 2 seals, because then you would know if it was broken, if it was mixed up. So likewise, when it comes to these blue strings, if you leave it by someone, you have to make sure that it has 2 seals. 1 seal is not good enough. We are afraid that maybe switch it with a different blue, string. Number 7, if a person found tchelis in the marketplace, even strands which were cut, it is unfit to be used. Shizurin, if they were twisted together, then share their kosher. If you buy a talis that already has tzitzis from the marketplace, if you bought it from a Jew, it's we believe that we presume that it is acceptable. If it's from a Gentile that's a merchant, we also we say it's acceptable. It's from a non-Jew that's a private person that doesn't have a practice and doesn't sell, he's not a dealer, then we say most probably it's no good. Number 8, talis shikula aduma or yeruka or mishat sivainin or sechute lavan shalak ein siva. If let's say you have a talis, see my talis is white with some black on it, but if you have a talis that's fully green or red or other colors, then you should make the tzitzis. You should dye the tzitzis the same color as the garment. If it's green, make it green. If it's red, make it red. If the garment itself is tcheles, this blue dye, its white strands should be made from any other color than black, because then it will resemble tcheles. And he should also wind 1 strand of tcheles around all the strands, just like if we would do if it was non-colored. Number 9, and with this we finish the last paragraph for the 2nd chapter. Now, if somebody, he says like this, he says, we spoke about that you should have the white strings and you should have the blue colored, which is the tcheles. Now he says, if somebody doesn't do the blue strings, we understand, the punishment is not as severe, because at the end, it's hard to get the blue one. It may not be easy for you, but the white strings, says the Maimonides, you could get that anywhere. So if you're not doing the white strings, then it's on you. It's not because they're not available. So therefore, they're both important, but but the white ones are more of a responsibility, and the punishment is more, so to say, because that is something that is very easy and very accessible. And with that, we finish chapter number 2.
Thank you, Yosef, my dear son. Thank you.
Yes.
Carrying the load.
Stop sharing, so you could share, right? I'm going to stop sharing so you could share.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. 1 second. So now I could share. Welcome, everybody. Can everybody see the screen in front of them of the Rambam?
Yes. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay, let me get to this chapter. There we are. Okay. So the 3rd chapter of the laws of tzitzis. Ksus shechayav adam lasos by tzitzis min atera hiksus sheyesh la arba knafayim or yoser al arba. So what kind of garment is it that we need to have in order to make the tzitzis? So the tzitzis we know are the strings, but then there's what kind of garment is obliged. So it has to be a 4-cornered garment or more than 4 corners. So that is the dimensions. What is the size? So it needs to be large enough to cover both the head and the most of the body of a child. The child meaning here someone who can walk in a marketplace, which is like a 9-year-old child, the commentators say. So the third point in what it needs to be is that it has to be made from wool or linen alone. So that's the first halacha in what is necessary for the beged, for the garment itself. Aval talis shel shar minim ki goin bigdei meshi or bigdei tzemer. So in contrast, a garment that's made from other fabrics, in other words, not wool or linen, right? But it's made from either silk, cotton, camel's wool, hare's wool, goat's wool, and the like. They are not obliged in the mitzvah of tzitzis. In others, biblically, you're not required to put in such a garment tzitzis. When is it required, though? Rabbinically. And the reason why is to show regard for this particular mitzvah. But it's all not a biblical law that you're fulfilling when you're using, for example, cotton as opposed to wool. So the these garments that require tzitzis are only, again, when they're four-cornered or have more than four corners and are measured, as we said above. The most important principle over here is that the garments mentioned in Torah, without any further explanation, refer only to wool and linen. Halacha Gimel. It says in the book of Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, the book that we just began, Al arba kanfos ksuscha, on four corners of your garments. Balas arba b'loy balas shalosh. So that means it has to possess four corners, but not three. V'im kain balas arba v'loy balas chamish. So then it should say also that it's specifically four and not five, but we just learned that it could be five corner. So the verse comes and tells us that the word contains in order that you should cover yourself. In other words, what does it mean you should cover yourself? And that means even five or more. In other words, because as he says, so then the question is, you're right, so it covers you five. In other words, three won't cover you because it's only three-cornered. Four will cover is the amount that the verse says. Excuse me. So then why would we include five? So he explains me because when you have five, that includes four. In other words, three doesn't include four, but five-cornered garment includes four. And since the Torah tells us four, so we are learning from there, it's the five-corner is fulfilling that mandate of what the Torah is telling us. So now, if let's say you have 5 or 6 corners, right? So which corners are you going to put the tzitzis? You only put them on 4. You don't put on 5 or 6. You only put on the 4. So in order that the 5 includes the 4, that means you have to put it on the most distant corners from each other, right? So I don't have an example of this, but you can picture it in your mind that, the 2 distant corners would be including something that would then be in the middle of it. So if you have 5 or 6 corners, doing in that fashion is the appropriate way. Halacha Dalet. What if the garment was made from cloth, but its corners from leather? You make it from leather, so it's stronger, the corners. It is nonetheless chayeves, it requires tzitzis. V'hi shel or, v'kenafeh shel beged, petura. What if it's the other way around? What if the main part of the garment was made from leather? It's a leather garment, right? It's not wool or linen, which is what the requirement is. But the corners are made from that cloth, right? From wool or linen. So we say it is not obliged. Why is that? Because what's the determining factor over here is what is the main makeup of the garment. So if the main makeup is wool or linen, So, and you just have corners of leather, fine. But if the main is leather and just the corners are made from wool and linen, it is not obliged in for tzitzis. What if you have a garment that, it was an expensive garment, it's a 4-corner garment, and you have 2 people that are partners in it? It requires tzitzis. Shenemar, because the verse says in Bamidbar, in Numbers, al kanfei vigdeihim, on the corners of their garments. Loi nemar b'ksuscha ela lemayit she'ula. So there it's speaking in plural terms. Plural meaning 2 people own it. But in the previous verse in Deuteronomy, it says ksuscha, which is in singular term. So that seems to be somewhat of a contradiction. So the Rambam explains that verse is only coming to exclude a borrowed garment, but not 2 people who own the same garment, because one is owning it and one is borrowing it. So the borrower doesn't need to make, if you borrow like from someone who isn't Jewish, right, and they didn't put on tzitzis, now you have a 4-corner garment, you have to put on tzitzis on it. So since it's borrowed, so from the term ksuscha, which is your garment, meaning your singular garment, not that it belongs to someone else, not that it's yours and a borrowed, it excludes that. But that's only for the first 30 days. If you borrow within the first 30 days, you're not obliged in tzitzis, but thereafter 30 days, you're obliged in putting tzitzis on. Halacha hey 5. A garment of wool and white strands should be made from wool. In other words, the garment is from wool. Just to show you over here, here's a garment. This is wool. It's made from wool. The strands should also be made from wool. How about if you made a garment from linen? So then the strands that you make, the tzitzis, should also be from linen. Shall kol min vamin meminoi ki gain chute meshi ksus meshi chute neitza ksus neitza. Now, if garments are made from other fabrics, right, which makes it only a rabbinic law that you have to put tzitzis on, the white strands that you're making should be made from the same fabric as that garment itself. So, example, if you're a silk strand, should be made from silk garment. If it's strands of goat's wool, then you should make the garment from goat's wool. Im rotza lasois lovan lachol shar minim mitzemer vishtim oise. If one desired to make the white strands, the tzitzis of wool or linen for the garments of any type of other fabric, like we just mentioned, if you're making from goat's wool or and the like, then you can make it from the wool or the linen, because remember, wool or linen is the biblical obligation, and that is something that can be used for any type of fabric. So in contrast, though, that from other fabrics, they can fulfill of the tzitzis only of their own fabric. So I can't take goat's wool for the garment itself, and then I'll take silk to make the strands of tzitzis. That I can't do. I can't. Why? Because that's can only take from its kind. But when it comes to wool and linen can be used for strands for any of the garments, any types of the garments. Halacha 6. So what's the ruling regarding making woolen strands for a garment of linen? Or the other way, linen strands for a garment of wool. So what? Now let's think about this for a moment. It's wool and linen, right? In other words, if I make, let's say my garment is made from wool, but I'm making my strands of tzitzis out of linen. What's the problem with that? Does anybody think for a moment? Wool and linen putting together in one garment is called shatnez. So the Rambam says, "Sharei oh, sorry, bedin hu שהשטנס מוטלין ציצית, שהרי התחיל לצמר, תילן oisel לפשטן, מפני מה שאין oisin כן. So he says like this, you might think that this should be permitted. Why? Shatnez, that's one of the prohibitions in the Torah. I'll wear a wool and linen together. Why? Because when it comes for a mitzvah, you're allowed positive commandment. When it comes for the sake of a positive commandment, you're allowed to have wool and linen. So here's a positive commandment, fulfilling the mitzvah of tzitzis, then the prohibition falls away. So we would think that you would be able to do that, as evident from the fact that tchelis is made from woolen strands, and yet it should be placed on a linen garment. Nevertheless, says the Rambam, this is not done. Why? Why wouldn't it be? So he gives the explanation. It's very simple. Because if it's possible to make the white strands from the same fabric as the garment, in other words, make from wool, and linen, so that's what you should do. So there's a conflict over here when it comes to the observance of the positive commandment and the adherence to the negative commandment. So that applies when can you have wool and linen together? When there's no other way that you can fulfill that mitzvah. But here you can fulfill the mitzvah. How? A wool garment with wool strands, linen garment with linen strands. You don't have to have wool and linen together. So therefore it's possible that you can observe both the positive commandment of tzitzis with a full wool garment or full linen garment, not wool and linen together, and at the same time fulfill the prohibition of not having wool and linen coming together. Now, if there's an instance that the two come together and there's no other alternative, then then it does push away. But in this instance, it does need not to. Hence, so is the law. Halacha 7. Ksus shel pishtan.
Is it on? It's not muted.
Sorry, if they can mute yourselves, that would be wonderful. Ksus shel pishtan ein matilin ba tcheles. Tcheles should not be attached to a linen garment. Ella is in lovam bilvad shechute pishtan. So, as a result of what we just learned, so when you're coming to a linen garment, right? Since you should make the blue tzitzis, the tcheles as it's called, shouldn't be attached. You should only make it from the white threads of linen itself, only itself. Because follow this. So why is it? I mean, tcheles is a preferred way. Having that blue strand is a preferred way. And if that blue strand is being dyed with a wool thread, so why shouldn't you do that? So he explains, because the prohibition against shatnez supersedes the mitzvah of tzitzis. Not because of that. I'm sorry. Not because of that. Why? Because there's a rabbinical decree that if they wear the garment at night, that when you're not required to wear tzitzis, if you remember, tzitzis is something that you need to be able to see. So therefore, that's why it's only required to wear it during the day, even though the custom is we wear it at night. That's for Kabbalistic reasons. But for the mitzvah reason, we only have the obligation to wear it at night. So now what would happen if you're going to wear at night your tzitzis by mistake, tzitzis that has a linen garment and you have the blue tcheles that is from wool. So now you're transgressing wearing a garment of wool and linen. You're going to say you're wearing tzitzis, and therefore for the commandment you're allowed to, but it's nighttime. You don't have an obligation to wear that. Therefore, the rabbi said when it comes to a linen garment, do not wear the tcheles with it, because then you will come mistakenly, because again, the custom is that we wear the tzitzis the day and night, that we won't come and transgress the prohibition of wearing shatnez. So, right, this is because the obligation to wear tzitzis applies during the day, but not at night. As we just mentioned, it says, and you shall see them. Now, nevertheless, what comes out from this? A blind person. Do they wear tzitzis? Yes, they do. Why? Because even though they don't see the tzitzis, but other people do see it, right? In other words, it's not just about you seeing it. Other people see the tzitzis. How many times, you see a guy going down with his tzitzis hanging, a yeshiva student with his tzitzis hanging, Nishtokenvel doesn't care, I identify as a Jew, I'm acting as a Jew, my tzitzis are flying, and how that can inspire another person to see that and bring them to do a mitzvah. So it's about seeing, and it could be others people seeing. So a blind person does wear. Halacha 8, mutar l'adam lidlosh tzitzis b'layla bein b'chol bein b'Shabbos. Now, so speaking about night, we continue with the idea. It's permitted for a person to wear tzitzis at night, whether it is a weekday, whether it's Shabbos, even though it's not the obligated time. But don't make a blessing on the tzitzis because you don't have the obligation. When are you obliged to make the blessing on tzitzis in the morning? What is considered daytime? When you can make a distinction, right? Not in your home with the lights on, but when you went outside or in your home when it was pitch dark, no lights, and you can make a distinction between the blue of your tzitzis and the white of your tzitzis, that is enough of morning time that you can make the blessing. What is the blessing? Blessed your Lord, God, our King of universe. You have sanctified and commanded us with the mitzvah to wrap ourselves, in be encompassed by the tzitzis. Anytime during the day that you are wrapping yourself with the tzitzis, you make the blessing. And just like by tefillin, you don't make the blessing when you're making the tefillin because the point is not about the making of it. The point is, of course, the wearing of the tzitzis. Therefore, the blessing is only said then, but when you go to wear it. Halacha 9. Interesting idea. Tefillin, you can't go into a tefillin, into a lavatory, into a bathroom or a bathhouse, but tzitzis you're allowed to. Furthermore, what happens with the strands that they get ripped, very easy, especially when they're out and they're flying, they easily get caught in something. So what do you do with them? Throw it in the garbage. Why? Mitzvah, because it is a mitzvah that is not the physical object, doesn't have the sanctity. But also, doesn't have the sanctity. It's the mitzvah of wearing it. It's not the object that has the sanctity, as opposed to tefillin, as opposed to a chumash or a Torah or a mezuzah, but not tzitzis. Nonetheless, if you're selling a garment with a four-cornered garment and has tzitzis on it, you have to take off the tzitzis when you're selling it to a non-Jew. So why? Not because it's holiness to the garment, but rather maybe he's going to cover himself up with this garment and look like a Jew, and try to use that as a way to kill another Jew. Unfortunately, that has happened too often in the Holy Land of Israel. Yeah. Women and servants, slaves, and children under the age are not obliged to wear tzitzis from the Torah. In other words, it's not a biblical commandment. Why? Because it's a particular daytime obligation. And as we mentioned previously, that women are not obliged when it comes to mitzvahs that have a time parameter to them. However, a child, a male child, in order to educate them properly whenever they are of age, that they know how to put on their tzitzis. And for us, we actually do that at 3 years old. We start the child with giving that at their hair cutting at the upshernish. Then we start educating them with this mitzvah. Interesting that Rambam writes over here that women and slaves meaning biblical slaves that are not obliged in mitzvahs, that they want to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis. They're allowed to, but they don't make a blessing, because a blessing means, it's stating that they are commanded to and they are not commanded to. The Magen Avram, by the way, brings up over here that today, in this day and age, we don't do that. The later commentary in Jewish law, this is in times of the Rambam, he said that this was permitted, but today in halacha, it says that a woman should not be doing this, and it gives various sources and reasoning. Likewise, other positive commandments that women want to fulfill, even though they're not obliged to do it. If they want to do it, they should do it without a blessing, and you should not make anything of it. A tumtum, an androgynous individual. Tumtum is someone who you can't tell, they're covered over their genitals, and therefore you can't tell whether they're male or female. Androgynous means they have signs of both. They're obliged in all positive commandments because of the doubt of their status. So therefore we go, it's a biblical law, so we have to go with the more stringent and consider that they're obliged. Therefore they fulfill this positive commandment, but without reciting a blessing, because the blessing is rabbinic, and since there's a doubt over here, blessing isn't said. Halacha number 10. What is the nature of this obligation of the mitzvah of tzitzis? Kol adam shechayav lasis mitzvah miskas viksus arad letzitzis yati lo tzitzis v'achakaf miskas ba. So it means that any person who's obligated to fulfill this mitzvah, when they adorn themselves, when they wear a garment that is fitting for tzitzis, as we explained, it has to have 4 corners. By the way, I want to just show you something over here interesting. I'm wearing here a kapata, and it's got 4 corners to it. How come I'm not wearing tzitzis? You see 2 corners? Here's a 3rd corner. A regular suit doesn't have to wear, but this is much longer than a regular suit, right? So another corner, that's 3 corners. Look over here. It's not a corner. It's rounded off. Purposely rounded off, so it should not have the obligation of tzitzis. So, and that's a kapata. So you wear the garment requiring the tzitzis, and then that garment, you should attach tzitzis to it if it doesn't have it, and then you could wear it, right? If you put on this 4-cornered garment without having tzitzis on it, you have nullified a positive commandment. What happens if you bought a 4-cornered garment? Do you have to put it on right away? If it's a 4-cornered garment. By the way, a towel is not a garment. It's 4-cornered, but it's not a garment, so it doesn't need tzitzis, right? We're talking about a garment that you wear. But so if you bought a 4-cornered garment, like let's say you bought this from someone who didn't make it properly, right? Do I have to put tzitzis on right away? No. It's only when a person wears it, it's obliged. In other words, it's not the garment itself that has a holiness to it, that therefore it needs the tzitzis. So therefore, immediately when you get the garment, put tzitzis right away, and maybe you're going to wear it a week or a month or whenever. No, you don't have to put it on until you're ready to wear it. When you're ready, because the mitzvah is about the wearing, and that's when you have to put on the tzitzis. Halacha Yud Aleph 11. Now, you might say, I don't need to wear a four-cornered garment. I'm not going to wear a kappata, or if I wear it, it's three-cornered. I'm not going to wear. So I don't have the obligation to wear tzitzis, since the whole obligation we just said is only because you wear it. And what if I don't wear it? So he says that anybody who is a chassid, in other words, wants to fulfill the commandments of God as a pious individual, they will make sure that they put on tzitzis. They will make sure that they do that mitzvah, even though if it's not a foreign garment, I don't need to. A person should always seek to find a garment. I mean, today it's very simple. Back in the day, it wasn't this simple. They had garments that had the obligation. Today, we buy specifically a garment called tzitzis, and we fulfill the mitzvah that way. But a person should seek out to do the mitzvahs of b'shas tefillah, and especially when it is the time of prayer. It's a very bad, negative thing that a person who is a scholar in particular, that he prays without being wrapped in a talis. The final halacha 12. Shakla v'solaba kol mitzvahs kulan shenemar. Re'isa ma'isa v'zchatim is kol mitzvahs Hashem sakol hilchas tzitzis. First, you should always be careful with regard to the mitzvah of tzitzis, because the Torah considered it equal to all of the other mitzvahs in the Torah. Considered that all the other mitzvahs are dependent on them, as the verse says. Re'isa ma'isa, and you shall see them. Uzachartim, and you will remember. As kol mitzvahs Hashem, all of the mitzvahs of God. So meaning through this particular mitzvah, we have an amazing opportunity that we can remember all of the mitzvahs. That's how great this particular mitzvah is. So we have one of our, is she here? Yes. I just came back. I'm sorry, was at a funeral. So that's why I couldn't give the class earlier. Thank you, Yosef, for filling in. Much appreciated. But so got a text from one of the people right now that her son, that tzitzis got ruined, and if I had a pair, so I have a couple of pair that, God willing, now that I'm back, I can send them off, and it can fulfill the mitzvah, because it is a great mitzvah. And with that, we conclude the laws of tzitzis. Any questions, any comments, any thoughts?
Is it a number of wraps and knots and so forth? Does that add to 613?
Yes. So I don't know if Yosef went through the details, but let's take a moment. So the word tzitzis is a numeric value of 600. The word tzitzis. If you see the tzitzis, there's 5 knots. Yeah, I think Yosef mentioned about the 5 knots. I remember that. I was listening in my car coming back from the funeral. So there's 5 knots. And how many strings are there? 8. 5 and 8, 13 plus 600, 613. That's how it adds up to the mitzvah of tzitzis, to 613. I have a couple pair of tzitzis left. Anybody wants to fulfill the mitzvah, let me know. We could have them sent out to you. I mean, it's only an obligation for Jewish men over 13. Anybody under 13 here? Sorry. Any other questions, any other comments? Thank you, Asher, for that. Davida, please.
Yes, Rabbi Fine. I was just wondering, I hear a lot of these pro-feminist women saying that they wear tzitzits, and they bring up the fact that Rashi's daughters wore them. Why did they
what? I didn't catch that.
They brought up the fact that Rashi's daughters wore them. And I was just wondering, why did it stop? Because I don't believe in wearing them. And I don't know what to say to the women that are telling me it's okay to wear them.
Okay, very good. Very good question. Thank you for asking that. So I'm just looking up over here. Give me a moment. So I have the commentaries over here. Oh, it's the Ramah that says, okay. So first of all, okay, everything in Jewish teachings, or everything in life for that matter, if you don't have the right context for something, then, everything can be misunderstood and what's the word I'm looking for? Even worse than misunderstood, could be perverted. That's the word I'm looking for. We can pervert anything. Anything could be perverted. Let me explain. We just learned in today in Tanya, right, that with the right faith, then you can contemplate properly about God. Without the right faith, that God is immanent and transcendent at the same time, but you're not going to seek and look for God's goodness and his wonders in your life, right? Well, same intelligence, because you don't have the right context. You don't have the right appreciation, the context of faith. Then absolutely it won't work. And that's exactly what happens to pagans like the Nazis and what they did as a result, right? The extreme, of course, of that. So without right context, nothing, you can again corrupt anything and pervert everything. So the right context of this is halacha is called Jewish law. Halacha is the path that we follow. And halacha is not because the Rambam says, look at that, I could do it. That's not halacha. We are not learning halacha here. We're learning Rambam. Rambam was written over 850 years ago, and he is not the final opinion on everything. His opinion is a very important opinion that is taken, and it's taken very seriously by all the later commentaries. Let us, no question about that. Absolutely, it's taken very seriously, but it's an opinion, as there's many other opinions. And not only it's an opinion, this is specifically speaking not about a pure halacha, like, how do you make the knots, versus about women and how that you should deal with them and them doing mitzvahs that are not obliged. Now, Rashi's daughters lived before the Rambam, right? So back then, there was not a problem about women doing things that they were not obliged to do, because men understood that they were men and women understood that they were women. Women were not trying to become men, and men didn't try to become women. The lines were very clear. So therefore, back then, it wasn't such a problem. Today, we live in a different world. Men today want to be women. Women want to be men. And as a matter of fact, they even want to mutilate themselves to do that, which is a horrific and terrible thing. So now it's very different. So I don't follow because, look at that, I found in the Rambam. You can find an opinion for anything that you want. And if you want to dig deep enough, you can find an opinion that will say, look what I can do. I can do whatever you want. And you can find an opinion, but that's called a dishonest individual. In other words, you have what you want, and you found someone one person that wrote 1,300 years ago an opinion that said that I could do such and such, so I'm going to do it. So the Rambam writes, but that's not what we follow. We follow what the Code of Jewish Law says. And the Ramah in the Code of Jewish Law clearly says that women should do that. Now that was written after the Rambam, about 500 years later, 400 years later, after him. And we follow, again, halacha means holech, to go. The path that we go is Jewish law, which is current. So now, for example, the proper rabbinic authorities who will, who really are scholars and are not just scholars, but sages who don't have an agenda, but want to really know what is the right thing that should be adjudicated here. Those are the people we need to listen to, and not someone who calls himself a rabbi, right? Including me. I'm not, one of these sages of that knows the Talmud backwards, forwards, and knows all of the Code of Jewish Law and all of the intricacies. And then now, when it comes to an issue, a fine-tuned issue that needs to be discussed and debated, You have some, you have some people, great people like that. So we need to defer to them. Not I found an opinion. So the problem is there's in that context, and it's, I found what I want, so I'm going to do what I want. Are they observing Shabbos the way the Jewish code of Jewish law says? If this person's observing Shabbos completely the way the code of Jewish law says, and now they say they want to wear a talis, you know what? They're keeping Shabbos and kosher 100%. Start with what is your real obligation. You got to keep kosher 100%. You got to keep Shabbos 100%. The holidays 100%. You're looking for. So in others, it's got nothing to do with serving God. It's got to do with what I want to, how I want to express myself as a Jew. That's how you want to express yourself as a Jew? No. Hey. Some people want to do Shabbos on Tuesday and they express themselves as a Jew then. Some want to express their Jewishness as eating pork chops, on Friday night. Family gathering and we're going to eat pork chops. And I'm expressing my Jewishness. It's not Jewishness. Jewishness is what God says. So if you're doing what God says, then wonderful. I hope that provides some clarity. For you, I'm sure it does. But there are others that are going to appreciate that. It's a different story. Any other questions? Any other comments? All right.
I had a question. I wanted you to clarify number 9.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just the very first part because I didn't catch it too well about like.
What was the question?
Number 9.
In the last chapter.
Yeah, this last chapter, just the very first part because I didn't.
So we said that you can go into a bathhouse or into a lavatory with your tzitzis, and the reason why you can do that, you can't do that with your tefillin. You can't take a holy book into the toilet and read your chumash there. You're not allowed to do that. It's a holy book. The physical book is holy, right?
Right.
So therefore, the physical book can be brought. Tzitzis you can bring in because it's not, the garment isn't holy. The holiness is in the wearing of such a garment.
Oh, okay.
So it's not inherently in the physical object, its holiness. It's in the act of wearing it that brings you a mitzvah and a connection to God through the act. So the article itself, the beged, the garment itself, doesn't have holiness, as opposed to a chumash, as opposed to tefillin, or a mezuzah, or a talis. As a matter of fact, the talis that we wear, for davening. I'm talking about specifically the tzitzis, that we wear underneath.
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yeah, but if it gets like dirty or something, I mean, what is it still kosher or?
Yeah, I mean, you can wash it. You can wash it. You have to be careful
well, yeah.
when you wash. You have to be careful when you wash it, though, because you could shrink it, and also the strings. I don't. You know what? I just realized this joke was not told. Oh my gosh. I just got my stuff back from the cleaner. It's not such a joke, really. Kind of very sad. And gave my tzitzis. And then it came back and he charged for tzitzis $125 for cleaning it. $125 for a pair of tzitzis. A suit cost only $10, $12, and tzitzis $125. So the guy says to me, "Well, Rabbi, I had to undo all the knots on the garment." It was a joke. It's a joke. Right. So when you take your tzitzis, make sure they know they're not to undo the knots, and it probably better dry cleaning tzitzis than putting it. I mean, you probably could put, if it's cotton, you could put it into the washing machine, but you have to be careful, or it might be better just to hand wash it to clean it, rather than put it in through the the washing machine, or send it to the dry cleaner. That's my tzitzis story, my tzitzis joke.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah, but even if it's dirty, you can still fulfill the mitzvah. It shouldn't be dirty. You should clean it, right? Because remember, the physical aspect of it is that it has to be a proper size, has to be 4 corners, has to be large enough to cover, most of your upper body. As you mentioned earlier, of a 9-year-old. Actually, the tzitzis should be minimum 20 inches by 20 inches is really what it comes down to, in order to fulfill the mitzvah properly. And that's, what is the difference between the stars of a talus? Stars on a talus? That's already, that's not part of the mitzvah, anything that's on a talus. As a matter of fact, Chabad customs, we put nothing on the talus, not to beautify it, because its beautification is the mitzvah itself. That's the Chabad custom.
The status of the talus versus the status of tzitzit. Rabbi.
So the status of the talus is we don't take it into the bathroom, and I'm not exactly clear of the distinction why. Rambam didn't mention why. He was just speaking about tzitzis as a garment. In other words, fulfilling the garment. The talus that we wear is specifically for prayer. So I think it's because tzitzis we wear a whole day, right? When you're working, you wear tzitzis. When you're doing whatever you're doing, eating, drinking. Talus is specifically for prayer. Because it's specified for prayer, so it has an increased holiness, and therefore we don't bring it into the bathroom. Yet even that, it doesn't have the same holiness as tefillin. Doesn't have the same holiness. Very complicated. Nuanced.
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right, folks. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. We will continue. By the way, today is David's birthday. David Gamal, it's his birthday. Mazel tov. Happy birthday, dear David.
Happy birthday, David.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. All right.
Have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Be well. Mazel tov, mazel tov. Only simchas. Be well. All right.